There's a sound beneath the sound. A voice threading through the static of your day that you almost caught this morning, but then the phone buzzed and the coffee maker gurgled and someone needed something and it slipped away like smoke. You've felt it before. That faint tug in your chest when you pause at a red light or stand at the kitchen sink with your hands in warm water. A whisper so soft you're never quite sure if you heard it or imagined it. But what if that whisper is the most important sound you'll hear all day? What if God is speaking in frequencies your hurried life has trained you to ignore, and the message He's murmuring right now is the very thing you've been desperate to hear? Welcome to Holy Spark Soul. If you're here, you know what it's like to hunger for a word from God, to scan the skies for signs and strain for clarity while life roars on around you. This isn't about mystical experiences reserved for saints or prophets. This is about the everyday sacred, the divine whisper woven into the fabric of your ordinary hours. Easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Today, we're exploring why God often speaks in whispers instead of shouts, what it takes to develop ears that can hear Him, and how a single missed message might be the beginning of a conversation He's been trying to have with you for years. If you're new to this channel, we dive deep into the intersection of Scripture and the lived experience of faith, honoring both your longing and your questions. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're building a space here where God's voice can cut through the noise. Let's start with why we miss it. You wake up already behind, your mind flooded with the day's demands before your feet hit the floor. You scroll through your phone while the coffee brews, filling the silence with other voices, other stories, other people's urgencies. You drive to work with the radio on, fill your lunch break with podcasts, come home to the television's glow. And in all of that, there's no space, no margin, no quiet corner where something small and sacred could slip in. We've become afraid of silence, haven't we? Afraid of what we might hear or feel if we stop moving, stop consuming, stop distracting. So we pack every moment with sound, and in doing so, we drown out the voice we claim we're desperate to hear. God could shout. He has before. He spoke to Moses from a burning bush that roared with holy fire. He thundered from Sinai with laws that made the mountain quake. He sent prophets with urgent warnings and angels with announcements that shattered the night sky. But most often, most consistently throughout Scripture, God whispers. He murmurs. He speaks in tones that require you to lean in, to quiet everything else, to choose to listen. And that choice, that intentional leaning in, is part of the message itself. When you have to silence the noise to hear Him, you're already engaging in an act of devotion, already saying with your posture that His voice matters more than the chaos. Consider young Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3. He's sleeping in the temple, serving under Eli the priest. When he hears his name called in the night, Samuel, he assumes it's Eli and runs to him. But the old priest says he didn't call. This happens twice more. The voice persistent but not loud, not demanding, just speaking Samuel's name into the darkness. Finally, Eli understands. It's the Lord. And he tells Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" The fourth time the voice comes, Samuel is ready. He responds. And God entrusts him with a difficult message about judgment and leadership that will shape the rest of his life. But notice what had to happen first. Samuel had to stop assuming the voice was coming from a human source. He had to be taught to recognize that God might speak in a tone that sounded almost ordinary, almost like it could be someone else. He had to be still enough to hear it at all. Then there's Elijah in 1 Kings 19. He's just come off a tremendous victory on Mount Carmel, calling down fire from heaven, defeating the prophets of Baal, proving God's power in front of the entire nation. But Queen Jezebel threatens his life, and Elijah runs. He collapses under a broom tree and begs God to let him die. An angel feeds him, sends him on a 40-day journey to Mount Horeb, and there God asks him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Twice God asks this question, and twice Elijah pours out his fear and isolation. And then God tells him to stand on the mountain because the Lord is about to pass by. What follows is a dramatic sequence. A great and powerful wind tears the mountains apart and shatters rocks, but the Lord is not in the wind. An earthquake shakes the ground, but the Lord is not in the earthquake. A fire blazes, but the Lord is not in the fire. And after the fire, a low whisper. The King James Version calls it a still small voice. The Hebrew phrase is so delicate, it's almost untranslatable. Something like the sound of sheer silence or a gentle murmur. That's where Elijah finds God, not in the spectacle. In the whisper. Why would God do that? Why, after Elijah just witnessed fire from heaven, would God choose to speak in a tone so soft it could be missed? Because what Elijah needed wasn't more power. It was intimacy. It was the assurance that God wasn't just a force to be summoned in crisis, but a presence to be known in the quiet. Elijah was burned out, running on fumes, convinced he was alone. And God met him not with another miracle to perform, but with a whisper that said, "I'm here. I see you. You're not as alone as you think. Come close." Listen, this is the pattern throughout Scripture. God speaks to prophets in dreams that require interpretation. He nudges hearts with gentle convictions that feel like your own thoughts until you realize they're leading you somewhere you wouldn't have chosen on your own. He places people in your path at just the right moment with just the right word. He opens doors you didn't knock on and closes ones you were sure were meant for you. All of it, whispers. All of it requires you to be awake, attentive, willing to consider that the ordinary might be laced with the divine. Jesus understood this deeply. In John 10 verse 27, he says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Not my sheep hear my shout. My sheep hear my voice." There's an intimacy in that word, voice. It's personal, recognizable, the kind of thing you only hear if you've spent time with the speaker, if you know the cadence and tone and the way certain words land. Sheep in the ancient world knew their shepherd's voice because they walked with him day after day. They learned which call meant danger and which meant rest. They followed not because they were driven, but because they trusted the voice they knew. And Jesus is saying, that's the relationship I want with you. I want you to know my voice so well that when I speak, even in a whisper, you recognize it instantly. But how do you develop that kind of ear? How do you tune your heart to frequencies most of the world has forgotten? It starts with silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence. The intentional clearing away of noise so that something else can be heard. This terrifies us because in silence we confront ourselves. The anxieties we've been outrunning. The grief we've been postponing. The questions we've been drowning out with busyness. But on the other side of that confrontation, if we stay, if we don't immediately reach for the next distraction, there's a voice. Gentle, kind, speaking truth that cuts through the lies we've been believing. And it sounds nothing like the harsh critic in your head, or the shaming voice of religion, or the cultural noise telling you you're not enough. It sounds like love. It sounds like home. Psalm 46 verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." That word still in Hebrew is raph, which means to let go, to release, to cease striving. It's an active rest, a deliberate choice to stop the frantic effort to control and manage and fix everything. And in that stillness, in that letting go, you come to know God. Not just know about Him, know Him. The kind of knowing that comes from encounter. From sitting together in the quiet long enough that His presence becomes more real than the chaos you left outside the door. Mary of Bethany understood this. While her sister Martha hustled in the kitchen, anxious and distracted by preparations, Mary sat at Jesus' feet and listened. Just listened. And when Martha complained that Mary wasn't helping, Jesus gently defended her. "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." The good portion, not the productive portion, not the busy portion. The listening portion, the sitting at his feet and drinking in every word portion. That posture, that choice to prioritize presence over productivity is what tunes your ear to the divine whisper. So what does this look like practically? It means carving out time each day, even 5 minutes, to sit in silence and invite God to speak. It means opening Scripture not as a checkbox to complete, but as a conversation to enter. Reading slowly, letting phrases linger, asking what this verse might be saying to you today. It means taking walks without headphones, letting your mind wander and your heart pray wordlessly. Noticing what thoughts surface when you're not forcing them. It means journaling the questions you're afraid to ask out loud and then waiting, pen in hand, to see if an answer emerges that you didn't manufacture yourself. It also means learning to recognize the ways God typically speaks to you. Some people hear Him most clearly through Scripture, a verse leaping off the page with uncanny timing. Some hear Him in the counsel of wise friends who speak truth you needed to hear. Some hear Him in the persistent nudge toward a decision, a sense of peace or unease that won't go away no matter how much you rationalize. Some hear Him in creation, the way a sunset or a mountain or the ocean's vastness makes them feel small and held at the same time. God is endlessly creative in His communication, and part of the adventure is learning His language with you specifically. But here's what we have to address: the fear that we'll miss it. The anxiety that God spoke and we didn't hear. That we made the wrong choice because we couldn't discern His voice from our own. This fear can paralyze us, make us second-guess every decision, turn the Christian life into a high-stakes game of spiritual hide-and-seek, where we're always one wrong turn from disaster. But that's not the heart of God. Jesus said His sheep hear His voice. Not His sheep might hear if they're spiritual enough. Not His sheep will hear if they try hard enough. His sheep hear. It's a present tense certainty. If you belong to Him, you have the capacity to hear Him. And if you miss it once, He'll speak again. His communication with you isn't a one-time fragile opportunity. It's an ongoing conversation, persistent, patient, full of second and third and 100th chances. Think about Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh. Jonah ran the opposite direction, got on a boat, ended up in the belly of a fish. And from that dark, impossible place, Jonah prayed, and God heard him, and the fish vomited him onto dry land. And then what? God spoke again. Arise, go to Nineveh. Same message. Same mission. God didn't give up on Jonah just because Jonah tried to run from the whisper. He pursued. He waited. He spoke again. That's who God is. He doesn't abandon you to your mistakes or your missed cues. He keeps whispering until you finally stop and listen. There's also the reality that some whispers are meant to be slow burns. God plants a seed of an idea or a burden or a dream, and it doesn't make sense yet. You tuck it away, almost forget about it, and then years later, circumstances align and suddenly you understand. That nudge you felt 5 years ago wasn't random. It was preparation. That conversation you had that stuck with you wasn't coincidence. It was God marking a trail for your future self to follow. We live in a culture that demands instant clarity, immediate answers, quick turnarounds. But God often works on a timeline that requires trust, that asks you to hold a whisper loosely and let it unfold in His timing. Here's what I want you to understand at the core. Every moment is an opportunity to hear. Every breath is an invitation to tune in. You haven't missed your chance. The fact that you're here, that something in you resonated with this message, it's self-evidence that God is speaking, that you're already in the process of learning to listen. The divine whisper isn't reserved for the spiritually elite or the perfectly disciplined. It's for you, exactly as you are in the middle of your messy, noisy, complicated life. God is not far off. He's as close as your next inhale, speaking in the language of love you were created to understand. And when you do hear, when that whisper finally cuts through and you recognize His voice, something shifts. The decision that seemed impossible clarifies. The fear that held you captive loosens its grip. The loneliness that echoed in your chest quiets because you remember you're not alone. Have never been alone, that the God of the universe is bending low to speak your name. That's the power of the whisper. It doesn't just inform, it transforms. It doesn't just give direction, it gives presence. And presence changes everything. Reflecting on passages like this through a psychological lens can illuminate how ancient expressions of listening and discernment mirror our own inner dialogues, fostering resilience through honest expression. Yet if these themes stir deeper unrest, a conversation with a wise counselor might offer tailored clarity. So here's my challenge to you. Tonight or tomorrow morning, or whenever you can carve out a sliver of space, sit in silence. No agenda, no performance. Just you and the possibility of a whisper. Invite God to speak. Tell Him you're listening. And then wait. Don't force it. Don't manufacture it. Just be still. And if nothing comes, that's okay. You're building the muscle. You're training your ear. You're making space where there wasn't space before. And that space, that quiet margin, is where the whisper lives. If this resonates with you, if you've experienced God's whisper, or if you're longing to hear it more clearly, drop a comment below with your favorite scripture about listening to God's voice. Maybe it's Psalm 46:10. Maybe it's John 10:27. Maybe it's something else that has anchored you. Let's build a community of listeners here. People who are choosing presence over noise. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Holy Spark Soul and turn on those notifications. We're here every week exploring the depths of faith and the whispers of the divine. I'd also encourage you to check out our deep dive into Psalm 109 next, where we explore the raw honesty of prayers that don't polish their pain before bringing it to God. Don't miss this message. Not because you'll lose out if you do, but because you'll gain everything if you don't. God is speaking. He's been speaking. And today, right now, He's whispering your name. Lean in. Listen. The most important conversation of your life might be happening in the quietest voice you've ever heard. I'll see you in the next one.